Hello and welcome to Dojo Live this Wednesday, November 8th, 2023. My name is Kim Lantis and it's my pleasure to be co-hosting today along with America Guerrero.
Hello, everybody. Hello, Kathia.
Yes, hello,
Hi.
Kathia. Today's guest is Kathia Alezander, who is a product designer with Encora. Kathia, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, it's going to be a super fun conversation because we're going to learn about your experience of using UX to better understand who Generation Z, and more specifically, the Generation Z traveler. And we'll talk about what that means for travel companies and their products, more specifically, how they can better influence this generation to utilize their goods and services. But before we do, we'd love to get to know you a bit better. What's the Kathia story? What, gets you motivated to get out of bed in the morning and kind of led up to becoming a product designer?
All right. Okay. So a little bit about me. As you guys know, my name is Kathia Alexander. I'm an industrial design engineer. I've been working as a product designer, digital product designer here in Encora for about 4 years. I started off as an intern, so I've been working here for a while now, and I'm really, really excited to be talking about this topic today. It's a little bit of UX research. I've been doing more about user interface, more design work, but this was more in depth and research. So that was exciting.
All right, it's good for you. And I understand too that you are one of these amazing hybrids, a multicultural individual. Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, so I'm originally from Los Angeles, but I moved to Zacatecas, Mexico when I was like 12, I believe, and I've been living here since I love it, and I plan on staying here.
I love it. My stories, I do not have the Latina background, but I am from the state of Montana originally. Born in the United States through and through. Didn't start speaking Spanish until, my 20 plus years old, but I married a Mexican and I'm here in Mexico for the foreseeable future and probably till the day I die as well. So I love it.
And you eat tacos with egg and a Coca-Cola. So that makes you Mexican.
Yeah,
in my book, yeah.
That was one of my stories. One of the World Cups, I used to work at a factory before working with Encora as well. And
I didn't know
one
that.
morning, it was the World Cup, and I had my Mexico jersey. I had my flags painted on my cheeks. It was the breakfast break, and I was eating a scrambled egg and nopal. For those of you who don't know, nopal is a type of cactus. Take the spines off, of course. And a taco and drinking like a little glass bottle of Coca-Cola at like 9 a.m. And I looked around and I'm like, I could not be more Mexican.
Yeah.
I've arrived. But we digress. So let's talk a little bit about what you did. Why was this research done for the Gen Z traveler? What motivated this?
Okay, so as we know, we hear about Gen Z all the time, right? It's like it's the future, it's what's coming, but I don't think that's the case. I think it's there. I think most travelers right now, like if you go to the airport or see backpackers, most of them are Gen Zers already. I think millennials we've kind of crossed the border now, and I'm a millennial. I'm the last generation of a millennial. So it was just trying to kind of get ahead of the game and understand what's happening currently, how these behaviors of these generations are kind of transforming the industry already, and then where we should be heading. So this trying to help those travel industries and agencies to kind of better target their strategies to this specific generation and to understand how Gen Zers are influenced in their decisions to buy certain products, digital products specifically, or services for planning a trip specifically, right? Because travel is a whole world, but we kind of just specifically designed this research for travel planning.
Okay, who are these Gen Z? I think that I'm one of them, but I need to confirm with you.
I think you are, yeah. So I'm 1995, which is like the last year for millennials. So Gen Zers start at 1996. We're born from 1996 to 2010.
Yep, that's me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so they're kind of all grown up, working, having, in theory, money to spend, all of those types of things. And who knows if they have money or not? But at the point in their life where adventure and getting out and seeing the world makes sense, right? It's
Yeah, it's
experiencing
actually
freedom.
it is. And it's actually interesting because it's a very particular, I mean, every generation has their particularities, right? But I think Gen Zs, they're kind of divided into two. We have like the older Gen Zers that are closer to millennials, and then we have like the younger Gen Zers closer to Gen Alpha, right? So what we're talking about here, the older Gen Zers, the ones that are able to travel, have, you know, a little bit more of liberty, either that be like scholarship opportunities because they're students, or because they have saved up to do that travel, because not necessarily have, you know, that kind of like economic liberty to travel. But it is super important to kind of differentiate it from other generations that, you know, a lot of other generations take travel as a kind of like a recreational nocturnal, something that kind of motivate their identity. So that's super.
So the person I want to be, the person that I'm becoming, much more important in terms of like cross-cultural interaction experience.
Exactly.
And that's also, I'm imagining, influencing their choices in where to go, what to do when they're there.
Exactly.
Does that apply? I can feel related, but I live in Mexico. Is it different from a C-gen person who is located in Europe and another person who is located in the United States? Is it like the same feeling that we're experiencing about traveling and having an identity?
So this is kind of general for Gen Zers. There are particularities from like US and from Europe and from like other regions of the world, but in general, this kind of sense of identity and wanting to learn about other cultures and that kind of guiding their motivation to travel, that could say it's pretty general to Gen Z, and it's been done in other researchers. So it was part of the background research that I did before jumping into the specific one that we're talking about today. So
Nice. So let's dive into the specifics of this. What, if you could lay just baseline, I know it's a lot more complicated and for the time we've got today, but what was your process? How did you go about choosing and targeting who you wanted to talk to? A little bit about the process of what that conversation or back and forth with these individuals looked like. And then we can jump into what you found.
okay. All right. So as I mentioned before, Gen Z kind of divides into like the older Gen Zers and the younger Gen Zers. So we kind of targeted specifically older Gen Zers, who are the ones that are traveling, who have a little bit more independency, economic freedom, things like that. So it was specific 21-year-olds to 26-year-olds. And the requirement to be interviewed here was to have to have traveled at least twice in this 2023. So that means that they travel pretty frequently since
More
2023 has
frequently
been.
than I do.
We're not finished. It's November. So yeah, that means that they have traveled, yeah, about 2 to 3
I love it.
times per quarter. Mm-hmm.
And what was the research process? Like, what types of methods and mediums did you use?
Okay, so what we use it depends on research, right? But in this specific case, I use unmoderated interviews, and we use special software for that. So the results of this type of research varies quite a little bit from moderated interviews, because moderated interviews take much more time and they're much more like specific to like a smaller group of people. The quality of information is much larger, and the time to it takes to analyze that information is larger as well. But for unmoderated type of research, it just goes online, and the software targets that specific user personas that we're trying to target to get that information, and it's to a much bigger group of users. So the information is more quantitative, sorry, rather than qualitative. But I did run a small qualitative research beforehand to kind of get the response, to kind of get the fields of how the responses were going to come in, and then out of that qualitative information I designed the quantitative. if that makes sense.
It
Totally.
completely does. It completely does. You know,
Okay.
sometimes we have to go a mile wide and an inch deep, and sometimes we want to really dig in, and it makes a lot
Exactly.
of sense.
But with the results I got, I'm like, now I want to do like qualitative research with the specific answers that I got because I'm still left with a couple of questions.
Oh, of course, and I guess that's the nature of UI UX research in general, and this
Yeah.
ideation, right? This process of always wanting to become better and better.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool. So, what did you find out then? I know you said earlier this was specific to the booking process. Is that what you said?
Planning process.
Planning
Yeah.
process. Okay, sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it is
So,
my bet that TikTok is there.
It is.
and I'm like,
It
what?
is.
I don't. I'm the old. You're the bottom, the young millennial, Kathia. I'm the oldest millennial, and I know what TikTok is. I do not have an account.
I mean, you see TikTok videos everywhere, like even in Facebook or Instagram. So you don't have to have a
Exactly.
TikTok account.
My TikTok experience is limited to whatever shows up in my Facebook feed.
Yeah, same, same.
Yeah, so
But
TikTok's
yeah,
there, but what did you find?
so TikTok, Facebook, Instagram. Well, Facebook is like on the lesser side, but mostly YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok are the main social media types of accounts that kind of influence Gen Zers' decisions to go to certain destinations. But what was interesting is that it's not just social media; it's actually um, kind of a larger percentage, but it's not the 100%. So it goes from like 60 to 80% of Gen Zers using social media as inspiration, and then 20 to 40% of using some other means, like talking to people, talking to their teachers, their family members, or people who have gone to this destination, and that kind of influences them to decide on that destination. And then they use social media to kind of see where to go, if they like it, if that's something that they wanted to try out, how expensive it is, things like that.
Yeah, and it is unfair because the algorithm doesn't help. So, for example, if I want to see, I don't know, something in France, right? And there are mountains that I want to explore, and just with one video that I will watch in TikTok, then all the algorithm is going to be full of France places. So then it's like, okay, all right, I just fall in love with this place, and then I guess that I'm just part of that amount of people. Then it will go to Expedia or any other kind of other places. So is that correct, or what is like the next step?
Mm,
Yeah, I didn't dig into that deep into social media because from the first part of the research, we found out that, it's there, it's kind of part of their day-to-day life, but it's not so important for Gen Zers. It's just like, they go on social media for other things, and then they get that kind of notifications or feedback that you're talking about, America. So I didn't go into that much detail for the algorithm, but I know that that's the way they use it usually.
mhm. But I think the question was more about the planning and the next steps. So we're seeing
Exactly.
that the inspiration and the influence, for the most part, is coming from what we're seeing in our social circle or in other people's experiences that are presented to us, or at least to Gen Z. And then what's their next step? Once they've kind of locked in on something that's inspired them, where do they go or what's happening there?
So first, as you mentioned, is selecting the destination, which is kind of like the most exciting part of the process, but then it's like all the kind of nitty-gritty of things that you need to do. So depending on, the distance or where they're going, they need to figure out accommodation and transportation, right? Whether that means camping or bus ride, flight, gas for the car, toll tickets, things like that. So those parts, that was kind of general for both USA Gen Zers and European Gen Zers. They have the same highlights and pain points. Um, so figuring out transportation and accommodation is one of the like most stressful parts of planning a trip, and that also has to do with setting a budget. So we didn't really get into that specific of how they set budgets. It does vary a lot depending on their necessities, but depending on what they choose or how much kind of freedom they have in that budget is going to depend on the options that they choose for accommodation and transportation.
In terms of behavior, something that I experienced when I traveled to Chihuahua here in Mexico some months ago, I traveled with my brother in law. He is a millennial. And something that I experienced with my husband, who is also part of this generation, is that when we talk about what to do, I remember that my brother in law, he was ready with a PowerPoint presentation with some places that we wanted to see, but he was part of the logistics, and that was kind of stressful for us. And I thought, are we lazy, or is that part of us, or is what is that?
So you were more of the, we'll figure it out when we get there kind of.
Yeah, yes, exactly. I don't want to lie, but yeah, that was me.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's also something that I kind of dug deeper into when doing this research. So I asked these Gen Zers how much or what's the level of detail that they like to put into their travel plans, right? So one option is to just go with the flow and not even have a destination planned out. They can just like arrive at the airport or at the bus station and just say like wherever, cheapest plane ticket or bus ride anywhere. And then the most level of detail is having like all the places that they want to visit with specifics of I want to go to this museum first and then eat here and then kind of figure out like the map and then like the whole route. So in that range, I asked these Gen Zers, where would you position yourself? And about 60 to 80% of them position themselves in the middle. So that means that they plan out all the necessary details that they need for their trip. So if they need accommodation, they have it. If they need like transportation, they have it. And just kind of like a general list of the things and places that they'd like to see without like a set schedule. So they do like to have a little bit more freedom of, okay, I want to see all these museums or all these different sites, but it doesn't have to be this specific day or at this specific time. It's just kind of like a suggestion. So that was interesting to find as well.
And that's interesting to me. It somewhat, I think, is a juxtaposition compared to a product we got to speak with just last week. That was an experience booking platform called Mount, and CEO Maddie Rifkin was with us. And her posture, I believe she falls in the Gen Z profile. Maybe she's at the tail end of millennial. She's quite young. I think she's 26. So she's right there at the breaking point, right?
Yeah.
But her postulation and what they're doing is rather shifting, and let's choose the experience first. And then when I can fulfill that experience, that will help determine where I want to go. So her experience was, for example, she knew that she wanted to see the Northern Lights. And
Okay.
so she started investigating where can I go? How can I make this possible, right? Where do they happen? What times a year? And then personally, she landed on the closest and easiest place for me is to go to Iceland. And then she started with, I'll find, an airplane ticket. I'll find a hotel. So what's your take on that with what they're doing at Mount versus what you've kind of discovered? Is it opposite, or does it fit in with that?
No, I think it fits in. I think the general process kind of looks like what I described before. So first you just you decide on a destination, you select a destination, then you establish a budget, and then book transportation and accommodation. So those three things kind of like mix in together, kind of establish the budget as you go while you set transportation and accommodation, and that can either go before or after. But after you have that, then you create an itinerary of like the things that you want to see. So you first kind of have to get like all the essential things booked in order to get like the specifics, to get into that part. And some people, depending on where they land or how they set that motivation or that destination, because sometimes travel can be like, I have to go here for work, so I might as well, take that time to do like all the sightseeing while I'm there for work, or I'm going to go visit my grandma, so while I'm there I want to go visit my friend, and then while I'm there I want to see the Northern Lights, right? So things like that, depending on the motivation of the destination, is kind of like how the process diverges. But in general, I did find that those were like the classic stages of planning a trip.
Something that I also feel that it fits with Mount is that, for example, the way that I understand is that you book your stay with Airbnb, and you will see that the person who has Airbnb, there is a term that I don't remember.
The host.
The host, yeah, thank you. The host, who is partnership who has a partnership with Mount, that person will give you some recommendations to go and see, have activities, and that way you can trust them, and you know that you're going to have some fun time. But the part of investigating, you will do it with the host, so that gives you that relaxed feeling of what to do. So
The safety
those,
and security within the local and authentic experience, I suppose.
exactly. So you don't need to do more research. You will trust the host and the recommendations.
Yeah, it's a very, very interesting platform. But I want to hit here on something that you said earlier, and that's pain points. Because the way that I understand it, pain points often are the areas of opportunities that, travel tech companies can most benefit from as they're figuring out how to attract, right, users to their products and services. So what did you find out in terms of these pain points, or what it means for travel products? What should they be taken into consideration, for suggested features and this future? What's happening now and in the future?
Where we're going towards, right?
Yeah.
So, main pain point is one that cannot be solved, not by any of our digital products. It's just the way the economy is. So, main pain point, every single one answered this, was like the budgeting, finding the cheapest flights, the cheapest accommodation, the cheapest destinations, like no matter what you're kind of, well, I mean, the out of the people that were interviewed in this study, it was just, 99% of them mentioned it. And yeah, that's the main one. We have like smaller pain points, like finding an allocation or a hotel or an Airbnb that's close to the places that I want to visit, or finding one that kind of meets my budget but is also, neat enough, or has a good hygiene or cleanliness. So things like that were also mentioned. But yeah, as I mentioned, the biggest pain point was definitely budgeting for planning a trip. But what out of all of the other pain points that I found, and how that can be catered into like product services or digital products here, what we found out is that we tend to think of Gen Z, since they're not the youngest. Gen Alpha is, but we tend to think of them as like very tech savvy and into gadgets and into this like digital world. So I thought that maybe by suggesting like more technological advances, or like holograms or AI, things like that, like how interested they would be in using this type of technology to planning a trip. And the results were actually interesting, that since it's a generation that they're so used to technology in their day-to-day activities, when they travel, what they crave for is actually kind of like this human interaction and being immersed in the actual place. So they're not interested at all in like holograms or things like that. We did suggest one kind of product or feature that would be helpful for them, which is how would you feel about using a product where you kind of input all your information, all your requirements for your trip, and then the system kind of give you suggestions. So they said that that would kind of be helpful for them, because it would take some of the stress off. So those like low points in the process of planning a trip, as I mentioned, are kind of establishing like the budget, transportation, and accommodation. So if there's a platform that can give that information to me, if I already said this is my budget, this is kind of my limit, or give me like the cheapest flights, the cheapest accommodation for this destination on this dates, and other requirements that I may have, and then the system kind of giving me that suggestion with the help of AI or some other tool, then they said that that would be super helpful. Out of everything that we suggested, that was like the top liked by these Gen Zers that were interviewed.
Well,
And
heck,
another,
I'd like it, like a one-stop shop
yeah.
where I can say, I want to go here and I have this much money. Do your best.
Yeah. And it's basically kind of putting what we already have, but into one tool, right? Because we like have on one tab the flights and then another tab the accommodation. So it's kind of like, okay, but what about this date? Okay, it's cheapest to fly on this date, but it's this apartment that I want to rent isn't available on this date. So it's kind of like leveraging all of this. And then also Gen Zers tend to travel more in groups. So doing all of that and then organizing with your friends or with whoever you're going to travel, then it gets kind of messy. So being able to share those plans or whatever you have like in your digital product with your group so everybody can kind of like approve or suggest, then that would also be super helpful.
Did you find in this research that maybe Gen Z have this kind of a stressful moment when they are thinking about visas, passports, or any kind of government regulations out there that you need to know before traveling? Like having that information.
So no, none of them mentioned any of this as a pain point. But I do have an answer for why they didn't mention it. And it's interesting because I kind of divided the research into the two sections. So USA Gen Zers and European Gen Zers. And what was interesting is that when we asked each one where they would like to travel or where is their like their next destinations, USA travelers said that they wanted to travel within the US. Those were their next trips. And European travelers said that they're traveling within Europe. So that's why they don't need to look into this because they don't, they're traveling within their own continent, their own country. So it's easier, it's cheaper, and they don't need to worry about this documentation that you're talking about.
That's really interesting because like my idea of travel, and I guess for me, this is a lesson learned because it makes a lot of sense. Because for some reason in my mind, I have this idea of like travel needs to be exotic, different.
Mm-hmm.
I need to cross an ocean. And
Pina colada
that,
in your hand, right?
yes, and it's limiting because that type of travel, as we've said, is more expensive. It requires more time off from work and life and whatever else. And so we put it off and we put it off and we put it off. And so it's eye-opening for me to see like, yeah, it's so simple. Keep it simple, right? You want to travel, stay close to home ish. And, there's so much that you can actually see and do. So I think that's really important for me anyway, is thank you, Gen Z.
Yeah,
As silly
same.
as it sounds, like that is kind of eye-opening. And I think I have a question. We mentioned budget and this limitations, but still this desire and willingness to travel. Would you say that, current travel companies should not ignore this generation? I mean, even though they're trying to be budget savvy, what type of, fiscal power are we actually talking about here?
That's a great question. Yeah, definitely. That would be super helpful. I feel like this is what we should all be considering. I mean, it's not, as I mentioned, it's not the future. It's actually here. They're grown adults now, they're traveling now, and you should be able to influence these companies and these tendencies to fit everybody's needs. And to be honest, if you look into the motivations and the specific characteristics of this generation, they are very social conscious and globally conscious to like global warming and picking solutions or destinations that are better for the environment, where you don't have to take so many flights or where there's not that big carbon footprint. So things like that, I think that we should definitely learn from this generation.
And also take into consideration not only to help reverse the damage that we've done to the planet, but to help influence more and more travelers to come to your location. So what you're saying is Gen Z is more likely to pick the ecological option, even if it costs a little bit more, perhaps, than the
Definitely, yeah.
non-ecological option.
Mhm.
Interesting, extremely interesting. So what I'm hearing here is for travel companies wanting to target Gen Z, we need to be thinking about the experience of it all. Like, how is this going to impact me as an individual? How do I grow because of this travel experience that I'm going to be having, the personalization side, the ease of consolidating the travel planning portion, with the three big pieces being, of course, transportation, where you're going to be staying, and I forgot the other one. There were three.
Dates.
The dates.
Yeah.
And then we talked
And
about
budget,
and then group travel, how to help
Mhm.
make this easy to coordinate across individuals, and the green factor, right? Keeping all
Exactly.
of that in mind. That's absolutely fascinating. Thank you so much, Kathia, for sharing with us all about what you found about Gen Z, what that means for travel companies as these individuals are now off and free into the world. It's been a great pleasure speaking with you and learning from you today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
This was fun.
My last question, Kathia, if anybody wants to get a hold of you to learn more about your studies, what you do at Encora, how might they go ahead and do that?
So they can either use my email, so same as my name, kathia.alezander@encora.com, or in LinkedIn, Kathia Alezander.
I think it's down here. Ruben, you got it? Boop. There we go. All right. Perfect. Well, those of you, thank you so much for joining us today. You can catch our recap show on Monday morning as we talk about Kathia's show, our show from yesterday, as well as the two other from the week prior. And next week, we've got one show coming up, and that's going to be with Ira Vauk. She is the author of Hospitality 2.0, and it's going to be a good one as we talk about the basics, Hospitality Tech 101. So don't miss that. All right. Well, bye for now, everyone.
Thank you.